are these people?
This is my story for this week. It's going to be my 2 stories pretty much, so just strap in. It's going to be long and in depth, and I'm sorry, but it's necessary. No one else does this. No one else has covered this. So a few people have mentioned it, but I wanted to make sure it got the light it deserved, because mainstream definitely wasn't going to touch this. So let's start here at so for context, South Africa has made a call to the ICJ, aka The Hague, for the crimes Israel has committed, and essentially they took Israel to court. They said, "We'll see you in court, motherfuckers." So that's what they did. And here was the opening
You just have to
statement.
say with a South African accent, though.
Yeah, South African, you motherfuckers. I don't know how they would say motherfuckers in South African. Feckers? No, I don't know. Someone will know. But
Madam President, distinguished members of the court.
Look at this king, by the way. Look at this man's drip right now. This man came in stunting. What is that, Armani? You brought out the Armani? What is that? That is a nice suit, sir. Nice. Anyway.
It is an honor and a privilege for me to appear before you today on behalf of the Republic of South Africa. I wish to express my gratitude to the court for convening this hearing on the earliest possible date to entertain South Africa's request for the indication of provisional measures in this matter. In our application, South Africa has recognized the ongoing Nakba of the Palestinian people through Israel's colonization since 1948, which has systematically and forcibly dispossessed, displaced, and fragmented the Palestinian people, deliberately denying them their internationally recognized inalienable right to self-determination and their internationally recognized right of return as refugees to their towns and villages in what is now the State of Israel. We are also particularly mindful of Israel's institutionalized regime of discriminatory laws, policies and practices designed and maintained to establish domination, subjecting the Palestinian people to apartheid on both sides of the Green Line. Decades-long impunity for widespread and systematic human rights violations has emboldened Israel in its recurrence and intensification of international crimes in Palestine. At the outset, South Africa acknowledges that the genocidal acts and omissions by the State of Israel inevitably form part of a continuum of illegal acts perpetrated against the Palestinian people since 1948. The application places Israel's genocidal acts and omissions within the broader context of Israel's 75-year apartheid, 56-year occupation, and 16-year siege imposed on the Gaza Strip, a siege which itself has been described by the director of UNRWA Affairs in Gaza as a silent killer of people. As the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination warned on December 21st, hate speech and dehumanizing discourse targeted at Palestinians is raising severe concerns regarding Israel and other states' parties' obligation to prevent crimes against humanity and genocide in the Gaza Strip. This warning has been followed by a succession of warnings, including by 37 United Nations special rapporteurs, of the failure of the international system to mobilize to prevent genocide in Gaza. Today, we are joined in court by representatives of the Palestinian state, the Palestinians who work in the fields of human rights, including residents of Gaza who were in Gaza just a few days ago. They are some of the lucky ones who managed to get out of Gaza. Their future and the future of their fellow Palestinians who are still in Gaza depend on the decision this court will make on this matter. With the leave of the court, I now call upon His Excellency Mr. Ronald Lamola, Minister of Justice of the Republic of South Africa, to make South Africa's substantive opening remarks.
I thank the agent of South Africa for his statement, and I now invite the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services for the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Mr. Ronald Lamola, to take the floor. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Madam President, and distinguished members of the court. It is an honor for me to stand here in front of you on behalf of the Republic of South Africa on this exceptional case. In extending our hands across the miles to the people of Palestine, we do so in full knowledge that we are part of a humanity that is at one. These were the words of our founding president, Nelson Mandela. This is the spirit in which South Africa acceded to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide in 1998. This is the spirit in which we approach this court. As a contracting party to the Convention, this is a commitment we owe to the people of Palestine and Israelis alike. As previously mentioned, the violence and the destruction in Palestine and Israel did not begin on the 7th of October 2023. The Palestinians have experienced systematic oppression and violence for the last 76 years. On 6 October 2023, and every day since October the 7th, 2023. In the Gaza Strip, at least since 2004, Israel continues to exercise control over the airspace, territorial waters, land crossing, water, electricity, and civilian infrastructure, as well as over key government functions. Entry and exit by air and sea to Gaza is strictly prohibited, with Israel operating the only two crossing points. Given that continuing effective control by Israel and over the territory of Gaza, Israel is still considered by the international community to be under belligerent occupation by Israel. South Africa unequivocally condemned the targeting of civilians by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups and the taking of hostages on the 7th of October 2023. And has again expressly recorded this condemnation, mostly recently in its note verbal to Israel on the 21st of December 2023. That said, no armed attack on a state territory, no matter how serious, even an attack involving atrocity crimes, can provide any justification for or defense to breaches to the Convention, whether as a matter of law or morality. Israel's response to the 7th of October 2023 attack has crossed this line and give rise to the breaches of the Convention. Faced with such evidence and our duty to do what we can do to prevent genocide, as contained in Article 1 of the Convention, the South African government initiated this case. South Africa welcomes the fact that Israel has engaged with the case in order to have the matter resolved by the court, after careful and objective consideration of the facts and submission put before it, as the parties to the Convention have intended. This hearing is concerned with South Africa's request to the court for the indication of provisional measures and will necessarily have a narrow and particular focus. I invoke the words of Martin Luther King when he said, "The arch of the moral of the universe is long, always bending towards justice." South Africa's case will be presented by a team of 6 legal counsels, comprising of Dr. Adila Hasim, Mr. Tembeka Ngcukaitobi, Professor John Dugat, Ms. Blim Leckrone, Mr. Max Dupris, and Professor Vaughan Low. Dr. Adila Hasim, Senior Counsel, will provide an overview of the risk of genocidal acts in the perpetual vulnerability to acts of genocide. Mr. Tembeka Ngcukaitobi, Senior Counsel, will examine Israel's alleged genocidal intent. Professor John Dugat, Senior Counsel, will focus on the prima facie jurisdiction. Professor Max Duplessis, Senior Counsel, will discuss the various rights currently under threat. Blinny Crowell, King's Counsel, will present the argument of agency and potential irreparable harm. And Professor Wagenlow, King's Counsel, will speak on the provisional measures. I now request, Madam President, the court to call on Dr. Hassim. I thank you.
So, Collin, I know you watched a bit of this. You might have missed that statement specifically, and I think you were watching past that pretty close. You sort of like halfway through, I think. It was like 3 a.m, so I can't blame anyone for not watching it. But if you did, and it was also not easy to find. Consortium News had it. Al Jazeera had it. That's like it. And Roar Media had it. I wanted to shout them out for that too. But yeah, I wanted people in the chat and in the comments, if you're watching this not live, if you also watched it in full, in clips, live, tell me how much you were able to see these statements, because they didn't make it easy. So
No,
but
I only saw. I'm not sure what you pulled, but I didn't see this.
yeah.
And I was able to see some clips that Richie Medhurst kind of linked to on his Twitter. That's it.
So like this one in particular, we'll go back and listen to a few of these. But we heard his statements.
Discriminatory laws, policies,
but
and practices.
He did talk about that the broader context of the 75 years, right? Essentially, both these guys laid out what was going to happen for the rest of this, right?
Right.
So, you know,
The violence and the
this
destruction
guy,
in Palestine and Israel.
Ronald Lamola, right? I find it funny he brought up MLK right at the beginning, right?
For the last 76 years.
Right.
So,
On 6 October
you know,
2023,
what did he
That was
say?
a-
Gaza Strip, at least since 2004, Israel continues to exercise control over the airspace, territorial waters, land crossing, water, electricity, and civilian infrastructure, as well as over key government functions. No armed attack on a state territory, no matter how serious, even an attack involving atrocity crimes, can provide any justification for or defense to breaches to the convention, whether as a matter of law or morality. Israel's response to the 7th of October 2023 attack has crossed this line and give rise to the breaches of the convention.
So, dude laid stuff out pretty well, right? Here's something we didn't see. Here's was same Minister of Justice, Ronald Lamola, talking about, you know, you heard he mentioned Nelson Mandela in his speech, right? So he's going to give you some little more context to that.
There is a compelling argument that genocide is being committed in Gaza on the basis that there is an annihilation or cleansing of a civilian population, and also the quotes of Israel ministers and generals of the army aimed to annihilate the entire population of Palestine from the Gaza Strip. Our founding father has been very clear that South Africa is not free until the people of Palestine are free.
Any questions? Like,
Not from me.
no, yeah, these guys have been on it, no?
There is a compelling.
So, very clear Nelson Mandela would have been support. So, in context, had these in full, if you want to go watch them there, right? So, feel free to do that. Lise has a couple, right? But we're going to get to Adil Hassim, right? So, Israel's mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza, Israel's infliction of serious bodily or mentally harm to Palestinians in Gaza. Israel has deliberately imposed conditions on Gaza that cannot sustain life and are calculated to bring about its physical destruction, and Israel's military assault on Gaza's healthcare system, which renders life unsustainable. That was what she brought to the table here, right? So Richie replying to this, Israel's images toast 75 years of propaganda down the drain. Whatever the highly politicized and highest court in the UN system decides won't change the insurmountable evidence that Israel has been committing genocide for 3 months against Palestinians, never mind 75 years. So we're going to start here. A must-share video, perhaps the most important part of the South Africa case against Israel at the ICJ, presented.
The first genocidal act committed by Israel is the mass killing of Palestinians.
Nope. Come on.
The first genocidal act committed by Israel is the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza, in violation of Article 2A of the Genocide Convention.
What did you hear, Collin? Remember, this is a court, right? And these are lawyers. So they have to do what? Cite the code that's being broken, right?
Right.
I had people tell me that didn't happen from this side. So I just wanted to make sure we're catching all these articles that she's bringing up, okay?
Wait, pause. People were saying
to me
they weren't citing
that it was some idiots on Rumble. Don't worry about it. They're not important.
Oh, okay.
But it was like they hadn't watched. Not ours.
It's our audience.
I watched this on Roar Media to give them some support, and people found, because they were the only ones covering it, people on Rumble found it and decided to put I thought they were bots at first, so, you know, but anyway, it was like Jews are better lawyers, right? And yada yada. Like that's what was put out. So not the smartest of folks. So, but yeah, I just wanted to point out all these articles and breaks in the Geneva Code that she's citing, right?
Secretary General explained 5 weeks ago, the level of Israel's killing is so extensive that nowhere is safe in Gaza. As I stand before you today, 23,210 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces during the sustained attacks over the last 3 months. At least 70% of whom are believed to be women and children. Some 7,000 Palestinians are still missing, presumed dead under the rubble. Palestinians in Gaza are subjected to relentless bombing wherever they go. They are killed in their homes, in places where they seek shelter, in hospitals, in schools, in mosques, in churches, and as they try to find food and water for their families. They have been killed if they failed to evacuate. In the places to which they have fled, and even while they attempted to flee along Israeli-declared safe routes. The level of killing is so extensive that those whose bodies are found are buried in mass graves, often unidentified. In the first 3 weeks alone, following 7 October, Israel deployed 6,000 bombs per week. At least 200 times it has deployed 2,000-pound bombs in southern areas of Palestine designated as safe. These bombs have also decimated the north, including refugee camps. 2,000-pound bombs are some of the biggest and most destructive bombs available. They are dropped by lethal fighter jets that are used to strike targets on the ground by one of the world's most resourced armies. Israel has killed an unparalleled and unprecedented number of civilians, with the full knowledge of how many civilian lives each bomb will take. More than 1,800 families, Palestinian families in Gaza, have lost multiple family members, and hundreds of multi-generational families have been wiped out, with no remaining survivors. Mothers, fathers, children, siblings, grandparents, aunts, cousins, often all killed together. This killing is nothing short of destruction of Palestinian life. It is inflicted deliberately. No one is spared, not even newborn babies. The scale of Palestinian child killings in Gaza is such that UN chiefs have described it as a graveyard for children. The devastation, we submit, is intended to and has laid waste to Gaza beyond any acceptable, legal, let alone humane justification.
Thoughts? I mean,
they brought receipt after
Bro.
receipt after receipt after receipt.
bro, let me tell you, watching this was one of the most cathartic things I've seen in a long time. You know why?
Yes.
None of this shit has been brought. There is a reason that mainstream did not show this.
Yes.
Like, this is the first time I've heard anywhere other than on places that we watch and go to and talk about, has anyone saying any of this. And this is 4 minutes of a 3-hour long statement. Like, they brought it. So you'll be interested to see the response to this. How can you respond to this? You know? So they even knew how it would go down. We'll get to it, but let's head to the next one. If it lets me, there we go. So in context, bringing us some more. Here we go.
The UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls has pointed to acts committed by Israel that would fall under the fourth category of genocidal acts in Article 2D of the Convention. On 22 November, she expressly warned the following: the reproductive violence inflicted by Israel on Palestinian women, newborn babies, infants, and children could be qualified as acts of genocide under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, including imposing measures intended to prevent births within a group.
Article what now? Article 2? Just making it a point.
The UN Special.
Yes, we know the UN Special. Thank you. Yeah. So, okay. So, breaking. South Africa on ICJ. Israel Army said there are no innocent civilians. Israel soldiers proved that they understood the Prime Minister's message to remember what Amalek has done to you. As you know, they were surrounded by journalists dancing and singing. We know our motto. There are no uninvolved, that they obey one commandment to wipe out the seed of Amalek. The Prime Minister's invocation of Hamelech is being used by soldiers to justify the killing of civilians, including children. These are the soldiers repeating the inciting words of the Prime Minister. So, not sure if I brought that clip. I do believe so. Look at that. Look at that. I got the clip. Look at that. I'm smart. Here we go.
On 7 December 2023, Israeli soldiers proved that they understood the Prime Minister's message to remember what the Amalek has.
Now, you'll notice later, what is this man wearing? He's wearing this outfit, right? Lawyer's robes.
Yeah.
What normally goes with that?
in this case.
The hair, but he ain't doing that. He be all natural in that motherfucker. Let's go.
Is done to you as genocidal. They were recorded by journalists dancing and singing. We know our motto, there are no uninvolved, that they obey one commandment, to wipe off the seed of Amalek. The Prime Minister's invocation of Amalek is being used by soldiers to justify the killing of civilians, including children. These are the soldiers repeating the inciting words of their Prime Minister.
Did you read that, everyone? That was
For
Okay.
people who are listening, you might have
Yes.
to say.
Well, essentially they said things like this is Israeli soldiers, of course, right? Understanding the mission that Prime Minister Netanyahu gave them, right? Which is that there are no uninvolved civilians. They are the seed of Amalek. We will wipe them out, right? I mean, just to paraphrase.
Right.
So, and they did a nice fun dance. I mean, when you Google dancing Israelis, some different stuff might pop up now. So, you know, but yeah. So let's head to the next thing. So this is where we start. This guy's statements are where we start getting into explaining what he's doing is trying to explain how genocidal intent is being taken place here, right? So we've mentioned Netanyahu, right? And his statements. He's going down the chain of command, essentially, okay? So members of the Knesset, whatnot, that's what we're doing. We're trying to prove intent here. Intent is important in this proceedings, which you will get later, especially in our next segment.
Of grave atrocities have protested that they were misunderstood, that they did not mean what they said.
So he's literally explaining what Israel is going to do.
And that their own words were taken out of context. What state would admit to a genocidal intent? Yet, the distinctive feature of this case has not been the silence as such, but the reiteration and repetition of genocidal speech throughout every sphere of state in Israel. We remind the court of the identity and authority of the genocidal inciters. The Prime Minister, the President, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure, members of the Knesset, senior army officials, and foot soldiers. Genocidal utterances are therefore not out in the fringes. They are embodied in state policy. The intent to destroy is plainly understood by soldiers on the ground. It is also fully understood by some within the Israeli society, with the government facing criticism for allowing in any aid to Gaza on the basis that it is recanting on its promise to starve Palestinians. Any suggestion that Israeli officials did not mean what they said or were not fully understood by soldiers and civilians alike to mean what they said should be rejected by this court. The evidence of genocidal intent is not only chilling, it is also overwhelming and incontrovertible.
Okay. Like, just, dude, you're gonna like the rest of the night too. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Let's keep rolling. So, again, full videos at in context, right? So any suggestion Israeli officials didn't mean what they said or were misunderstood should be rejected by this court. We just heard this man say. The evidence of genocidal intent is not only chilling, it is overwhelming and incontrovertible. Okay? So, again, singing and dancing, there are no innocent civilians, right? That's, it's just kind of ridiculous. So here is Al Jazeera, right?
It is because of the policy of Israel that Gaza has become a place of death and despair. In conclusion, Madam President, many propagators of grave atrocities have protested that they were misunderstood, that they did not mean what they said, and that their own words were taken out of context. What state would admit to a genocidal intent? Yet, the distinctive feature of this case has not been the silence as such, but the reiteration and repetition of genocide.
I mean, the fact that Al Jazeera is split screening this the whole time, right, and did it when Israel was there, by the way. Pretty crazy. What did I say earlier, Care Bear? The brilliant South African lawyer, and I'm not even going to try to butcher your last name, but Timbeka rendered an eloquent and captivating argument at the ICJ yesterday. He did so wearing dreads and not the colonial relic. It's safe to say that South Africa has reintroduced itself to the world. Hi, I'm me, South Africa. The real South Africa. Will any motherfuckers please stand up?
He's saying my crown is okay. I don't want that white bullshit.
White bullshit. Yeah,
so.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So enter this lady. Oh my God.
This I see.
Dude.
Each day, yet more desperate people will be forced to relocate from where they are sheltering, or will be bombed in places where they have been told to evacuate to.
Really?
Entire multi-generational families will be obliterated. And yet more Palestinian children will become WCNSF, Wounded Child, No Surviving Family, the terrible new acronym born out of Israel's genocidal assault on the Palestinian population in Gaza.
What was that acronym again, Care Bear? Did we catch that?
Wounded child. Dot. Oh, fuck.
WCNSF, Wounded Child, No Surviving Family.
That they've coined a new acronym for this. Wounded Child, No Surviving Family. Reports of field executions, torture, and ill treatment are mounting, as are images of decomposing bodies of Palestinian men, women, and children left unburied where they are killed. Some are picked upon by animals.
The court has heard of the horrific death toll and of the more than 7,000 Palestinian men, women, and children reported missing, presumed dead, or dying slow, excruciating deaths trapped under the rubble. Reports of field executions and torture and ill treatment are mounting, as are images of decomposing bodies of Palestinian men, women, and children left unburied where they were killed, some being picked upon by animals. It is becoming ever clearer that huge swathes of Gaza, entire towns, villages, refugee camps, are being wiped from the map. As you have heard, but it bears repeating, according to the World Food Programme, 4 out of 5 people in the world in famine or a catastrophic type of hunger are in Gaza right now. Indeed, experts warn that deaths from starvation and disease risk significantly outstripping deaths from bombings. The daily statistics stand as clear evidence of the urgency and of the irreparable prejudice. On the basis of the current figures, on average, 247 Palestinians are being killed and are at risk of being killed each day, many of them literally blown to pieces. They include 48 mothers each day, 2 every hour, and over 117 children each day, leading UNICEF to call Israel's actions a war on children. On current rates which show no sign of abating, each day, over 3 medics, 2 teachers, more than 1 United Nations employee, and more than 1 journalist will be killed, many while at work or in what appear to be targeted attacks on their family homes or where they are sheltering. The risk of famine will increase each day. Each day, an average of 629 people will be wounded, some multiple times over, as they move from place to place, desperately seeking sanctuary. Each day, over 10 Palestinian children will have 1 or both legs amputated, many without anesthetic. Each day, on current rates, an average of 3,900 Palestinian homes will be damaged or destroyed. More mass graves will be dug. More cemeteries will be bulldozed and bombed, and corpses violently exhumed, denying even the dead any dignity or peace.
I mean, was it 127 kids a day?
Yeah.
Like, ugh.
That the disruption of access to education has a dramatic impact on children, and that conflict has lifelong effects on their physical and mental health. Almost 90,000 Palestinian university students cannot attend at university in Gaza. Over 60% of schools, almost all universities, and countless bookshops and libraries have been damaged or destroyed, and hundreds of teachers and academics have been killed, including deans of universities and leading Palestinian scholars, obliterating the very prospects for the future education of Gaza's children and young people.
So, talking about the destruction of universities, right? Hundreds of teachers and academics have been killed, including Arafat, who we've talked about. Rafat al-Arir, isn't that his name? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heard about him last month.
Yep. So, next lady on the docket.
This is by far maybe the biggest blow we have received.
Oh no. So,
but he said,
this made me cry. I could not watch this without, like, it's something I hadn't seen before, which on this is not much, you know, so.
No apologies will be accepted after the genocide. What has been done has been done. I want you to look in the mirror and ask, where was I when Gaza was going through a genocide? South Africa is here before this court in the Peace Palace. It has done what it could. It is doing what it can by initiating these proceedings, by seeking interim measures against itself as well as against Israel. South Africa now respectfully and humbly calls on this honourable court to do what is in its power to do, to indicate the provisional measures that are so urgently required to prevent further irreparable harm to the Palestinian people in Gaza, whose hopes, including for their very survival, are now vested in this court.
Madam President, members of the court, I should like to thank you for your kind attention. I ask that you call Professor Lowe, KC, to the podium now to describe the provisional measures sought by South Africa on behalf of the Palestinian people.
That didn't give me
I
what
thank
I
Ms.
wanted.
Negralik, and I now invite.
But maybe we'll get to it. So yeah. Right, this. Do I have it? No. It was in there. Hold on. Let's do this, and let's click this. Ewan has this in full, right? So let me go here. Let's teach everyone a trick. Let's go more, show transcript, Control F. And if I can actually spell for once. Yep. Yes.
The international community continues to fail the Palestinian people, despite the overt, dehumanizing, genocidal rhetoric by Israeli governmental and military officials, matched by the Israeli army's actions on the ground. Despite the horror of the genocide against the Palestinian people being live-streamed from Gaza to our mobile phones, computers, and television screens, the first genocide in history where its victims are broadcasting their own destruction in real time in the desperate, so far vain hope that the world might do something. Gaza represents nothing short of a moral failure, as described by the usually circumspect International Committee of the Red Cross. As underscored by United Nations chiefs, that failure has, I quote, repercussions not just for the people of Gaza, but for the generations to come who will never forget these over 90 days of hell and assaults on the most basic precepts of humanity. As stated by a United Nations spokesperson in Gaza last week, at the site of a hospital clearly marked with the symbol of the Red Crescent, where 5 Palestinians, including a 5-day-old baby, had just been killed. The world should be absolutely horrified. The world should be absolutely outraged. There is no safe space in Gaza, and the world should be ashamed. Madam President, members of the court, in conclusion, I share with you 2 photographs. The first is of a whiteboard at a hospital in northern Gaza, one of the many Palestinian hospitals targeted, besieged and bombed by Israel over the course of the past 3 brutal months. The whiteboard is wiped clean of no longer possible surgical cases, leaving only a handwritten message by a Médecins Sans Frontières doctor which reads, "We did what we could. Remember us." The second photograph is of the same whiteboard after an Israeli strike on the hospital on the 21st of November that killed the author of the message, Dr. Mahmoud Abu Nujayla, along with 2 of his colleagues. Just over a month later, in a powerful sermon delivered from a church in Bethlehem on Christmas Day, The same day Israel had killed 250 Palestinians, including at least 86 people, many from the same family, massacred in a single strike on Maghazi refugee camp. Palestinian pastor Munzar Ishaq addressed his congregation and the world, and he said, and I quote, "Gaza as we know it no longer exists. This is an annihilation. This is a genocide. We will rise. We will stand up again from the midst of destruction, as we have always done as Palestinians, though this is by far maybe the biggest blow we have received." But he said, "No apologies will be accepted after the genocide. What has been done has been done. I want you to look in the mirror and ask, where was I when Gaza was going through a genocide?" South Africa.
So, yeah. Any thoughts so far? Yeah, yeah. That one was rough for me.
You're gonna make me watch Israel's defense.
Oh,
I haven't
bro.
seen much, if any of it at all. And I wish you wouldn't, because I'm gonna rage.
It's like, yeah, I'm definitely
Like,
taking you through
honestly,
the roller
how
coaster
are
of
you-
emotions tonight. So
Right. Like, how what can you do
yeah, dude.
after this? What are you gonna do after this?
Well, we're not the only ones. I find myself shedding tears. I believed I had witnessed everything until South Africa revealed image from a whiteboard depicting the conditions before and after an airstrike. Like this one, that one got me watching it. I was like, oh, fuck. So, Johnny Graz here. Israel and the U.S. may succeed in buying or blackmailing their way past an ICJ verdict, but the arguments presented today will live forever. Israel will never again be seen as anything but a genocidal European ethno-colony. So good for you, Johnny Graz. You're out here doing it. So a little bit more. We're almost through it. So what do you think Israel's response will be here? Right? What have you been seeing to this response? Right? So I'll direct you
me taking shots
right down here. We were embarrassed by our government's failure to engage properly with Israel before filing the dispute, and by our hosting Hamas's leadership in South Africa 3 weeks after that organization indisputably yada yada October 7th yada yada. Okay, this man up here says, listen carefully.
Article 9 of the Genocide Convention makes it clear that state parties are guardians of the Genocide Convention. Unlike other treaties designed to protect human rights, it does not oblige states to pursue negotiations as a prelude to approaching this court. It does not treat the ending of genocidal acts as a bilateral affair between states. Instead, it envisages a situation in which a state, acting on behalf of the international community as a whole, seizes the jurisdiction of the court as a matter of urgency to prevent genocide. South Africa has a long history of close relations with Israel. For this reason, it did not bring the dispute immediately to the attention of the court. It watched with horror as Israel responded to the terrible atrocities committed against its people on the 7th of October, with an attack on Gaza that resulted in the indiscriminate killing of innocent Palestinian civilians, most of whom were women and children. The South African government repeatedly voiced its concerns in the Security Council and in public statements that Israel's actions had become genocidal. On 10 November, in a formal diplomatic démarche, it informed Israel that while it condemned the actions of Hamas, it wanted the International Criminal Court to investigate the leadership of Israel for international crimes, including genocide. As the court will know, the definition of genocide in the Rome Statute repeats that of the Genocide Convention. On 17 October, South Africa referred Israel's commission of the crime of genocide to the International Criminal Court for, quote, vigorous investigation, unquote. In announcing this decision, President Ramaphosa publicly expressed his abhorrence for what is happening right now in Gaza, which is now turned into a concentration camp where genocide is taking place.
So what was that about Hamas that South Africa had condemned? Just, you know, we're going to get into why they're not dealing with Hamas in this a little bit more.
Article 9 of the...
So, you know, they essentially stated that, like, they can't, there is no jurisdiction over Hamas by this court. Right? That's part of it. Jurisdiction is a big deal with this, which that guy's whole thing was about how there is jurisdiction here. On top of, and many people have uttered this, people like Craig Murray and so on, that this is not just a trial against Israel, but a trial against the court itself. Right? Which is why we're talking about jurisdiction this way. Right? Of like, no, this is genocide. You're supposed to do these actions. Right? So just keep that in your head. Let's continue.
South Africa believes that the publicly available evidence of the scale of the destruction resulting from the bombardment of Gaza and the deliberate restriction of food, water, medicines and electricity available to the population of Gaza demonstrates that the government of Israel, not Jewish people or Israeli citizens, the government of Israel and its military is intent on destroying the Palestinians in Gaza as a group and is doing nothing to prevent or punish the actions of others who support that aim. And I repeat, the point is not simply that Israel is acting disproportionately. The point is that the prohibition on genocide is an absolute, a peremptory rule of law. Nothing can ever justify genocide. No matter what some individuals within the group of Palestinians in Gaza may have done, and no matter how great the threat to Israeli citizens might be, genocidal attacks on the whole of Gaza and the whole of its population with the intent of destroying them cannot be justified. And no exception can be made in a provisional measures order to allow a state to engage in actions that are capable of violating its obligations under the Genocide Convention. It is unthinkable that a court would ever do such a thing. That is the simple point in this case. Genocide can never be justified in any circumstances. Israel's actions will be examined closely and methodically at the merit stage, when the court will want to hear what Israel has to say in its defense. What matters now is that the evidence indicates that Israel's actions have violated its obligations under the Genocide Convention, that they continue to violate them, and that Israel has asserted that it intends to continue them. Israel may say that it will comply with all of its obligations under the Genocide Convention and that orders from the court are not necessary. But in previous cases, the court has held that such unilateral statements do not remove the risk of irreparable prejudice or obviate the need for a court order. In this case, one reason for doubting the efficacy of any such unilateral undertaking is Israel's apparent inability to see that it has done anything wrong in grinding Gaza and its people into the dust.
Well, that's, yep. And I mean, I can't, not much I can say with this stuff, you know? So,
Right.
but this is, again, UK-based lawyer, right? Von Lowe tells the ICJ that although Israel says it does whatever it can to minimize civilian casualties, which we're going to get to in our next segment, its relentless bombing of Gaza's residential areas and safe zones tell a different story.
It's no use Israel saying that it does whatever it can to minimize the deaths of innocent men, women,
Come on.
and children. The use of 2,000-pound bunker-busting bombs and dumb bombs in residential areas and the relentless bombardment of Gaza and even of so-called safe areas to which Palestinians have been directed by Israel tell another story. But that is not the only point. It's not just a question of scale and of indiscriminate killing. It's also a question of intention. If any military operation, no matter how carefully it's carried out, is carried out pursuant to an intention to destroy a people in whole or in part, it violates the Genocide Convention, and it must stop. And that is why all military operations capable of violating the Genocide Convention must cease.
Any questions? You're wondering how a defense will be surmounted. I can already tell. Like,
it's no use.
I don't want to watch the next segment.
Yeah.
I should address the question of self-defense. In its advisory opinion in the Wall case, the court noted that the threat that Israel had argued justified the construction of the wall was not imputable to a foreign state, but emanated from territory, the occupied Palestinian territory, over which Israel itself exercises control. For those reasons, the court decided, as a matter of international law, the right of self-defense under Article 51 of the Charter, the UN Charter, had no relevance in such circumstances. 20 days ago, the Security Council affirmed yet again that Gaza is occupied territory. Though Israel refers to a complete withdrawal from Gaza, it has retained control over Gaza, over access by land and sea and air, and over key governmental functions and supplies of water and electricity. The tightness of its grip may have varied, but no one can doubt the continuous reality of Israel's grip on Gaza. The court's legal holding from 2004 holds good, and a similar point is to be made here. What Israel is doing in Gaza, it is doing in territory under its own control. Its actions are enforcing its occupation. The law on self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter has no application.
no application, Collin. So this is the last guy. So we're on the home stretch here. So, but, so again, we're going to have to listen carefully, right? So when are we bringing Hamas to the International Court of Justice? Oh, wait, we don't need to do that. They admit they want to commit genocide and all blah, 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 blah.
First, some will ask why South Africa does not seek any court order against Hamas. This case concerns Israel's actions in Gaza, which is territory that 3 weeks ago in Resolution 2720, the UN Security Council stressed is, quote, an integral part of the territory occupied in 1967, end quote, by Israel. As the court will understand, Hamas is not a state and cannot be a party to the Genocide Convention, and cannot be a party to these proceedings.
Rolling his fucking eyes.
There are other bodies and processes that can address the questions of steps to be taken in respect of past atrocities and against other actors, and they are no doubt considering what they should do. But as a matter of law, under the Convention, South Africa cannot request an order from this court against Hamas.
Right. And I think I tweeted that last week, that Hamas is not a state.
Yep.
So,
guess who was there, though, Care Bear?
You cannot bring them to court.
Guess who was there?
Oh,
Irish goddess herself, Claire Daly. Determined mood here in a truly international crowd outside the Peace Palace at The Hague as we witness the opening of South Africa's case at the ICJ accusing Israel of genocide in Gaza. It's not just Israel on trial today, it's the international community, right? So here we are.
Before you today, on behalf of the Republic of South Africa, I wish to express my gratitude to the court for convening this hearing on the earliest possible date to entertain South Africa's request.
Right? So, cheers, delighted people, right? No, thank you. Next, please. So, people in the West Bank gathered in Nelson Mandela Square to show their gratitude to South Africa. The South African national anthem was sung to express gratitude to South Africa for its efforts to bring Israel to justice for its crimes against the Palestinian people. Right? So here they are in Nelson Mandela Square, right? There's the statue of Nelson right there. Right? Look at all those flags out. Playing South Africa's anthem and whatnot. So legit, no, look, Kufia's out, but it's nice. Right?
Yeah.
So we can't have Claire Daly and Mick Wallace out here without hearing them speak. So let's do that, right?
European representatives of all governments are now, we're seeing them backtrack a little bit on their stances, considering that if they are considered complicit with the genocide, they also may face sanctions. The ruling will also apply to them. How do you feel about the David Cameron's recent stance when questioned about the British position?
Listen, okay, we're elected members of the European Parliament, but we're very well aware of the fact that politics disappoints and politicians disappoint. And the hypocrisy that we've seen in the last 90 days from European politicians has been breathtaking. It's shocking that they can talk about human rights or international law anywhere, and they have watched a genocide take place in Gaza. They have backed Israel. We flew Israeli flags on the buildings in Brussels. We had a vigil for the children lost in Israel, but not the children lost in Gaza. The hypocrisy is horrific. And the politicians of Europe have been exposed because they have been complicit in the atrocities that Israel has been committing against the Palestinian people. But the sad truth is that the US and the EU have not abandoned their colonialist position. The Zionism is a settler colonial project that was invented by Western powers, and they are proceeding with it today. They're supporting the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. A genocide is taking place in front of their eyes. The people all over the world can see what's happening. The politicians have been a disgrace.
Thank you so much. And I think that really does reflect the mood of everyone here today. We know that the ruling, of course, is not binding. And if so, and if they rule against the case of South Africa, what do you think the ramifications will be for people all over the world who will no longer be believing in the myth of international law being able to be upheld by Western institutions?
Well, for a number of years now, we've seen the Americans and the Europeans ignore the UN Charter. They've talked about rules-based international order, which is something they make up as they go along. International order, international law has been under pressure and in trouble for a number of years because a lot of it has been hijacked by US empire. And they are using and abusing human rights and international law to further the financial interests, and a lot of the times they have weaponized human rights and humanitarian law. But people are starting to see through it. People are waking up, and people can see. And I would say, never ever before have they been so badly exposed as their support for the Zionist project this time round. The people of the world can see through them now, and we need change. And you might say, well, whatever way the verdict goes, it will be difficult to get Israel to stop.
Yes.
But the people who can make Israel stop are the Americans and the Europeans. And people thought one time that South Africa would never give up on apartheid because they had such financial interests. The white supremacists in South Africa had a huge financial interest in keeping things the same. But it changed. It changed because the international community turned on them and they forced them to change. That hasn't happened with Israel, but we need that to start happening now. The people of the world want things to change, and it's about time we got rid of the politicians who don't want change because they're behind the curve.
Mick Wallace, killing it. Like the rock star he looks like, you know? So, I mean, tell me he doesn't look like he's a member of AC/DC, right? If you just saw him, you know what I mean? And he almost sounds like it with all the fucking tings and the, anyway, and the time, and anyway, I love both of these people, so, but,
European.
Click next, please. Thank you. Okay, so another legend, Max Blumenthal, right? Out here in front of he's at the White House press room, no? So he's going to ask the State Department how it dismisses the amount of evidence we just saw, right?
Right.
On that, Secretary Blinken has specifically accused China of genocide for its treatment of the Uyghurs. But Blinken didn't point to any mass killing there. According to Euromed Monitor, 4% of the entire population of the Gaza Strip is now dead or injured. In just 90 days, 65,000 tons of munitions have been dropped on the Gaza Strip, 3 times what was dropped.
You're seeing a deer in headlights.
You have evidence of industrial-style killing. The South African legal team presented 20 minutes straight of statements on the record by Israeli leadership expressing the intent.
Yeah. That's definitely it's very funny though, is it not? Like shit.
Team Walker in the chat said this speaker's texted his aide, who let Max in?
Who let Max in? Fucking very good, Team Orca. Good for you. Yeah, he was also at the beginning, he's like, I guess you could go. Like Max cutting his way in, you know, like,
for example, referring to the Palestinian population as Amalek. So how can you explain this discrepancy between Secretary Blinken accusing China explicitly of genocide with no mass killing, presenting no evidence of the mass killing of Uyghurs, and then dismissing out of hand the potential that Israel could be committing genocide in the Gaza Strip, calling it unfounded? How do you explain this?
Max is both calling out 2 things at once. The Chinese thing on the Uyghurs that has no evidence, right? And Palestinians' actual genocide. It was just fucking great.
The same way that I just explained it to your colleague who asked essentially the same version of your question, which is that each conflict is different, and any kind of determination like this needs to be based on specific facts and law. And when it comes to the points that are being made in today's hearing, again, I'm not going to speak to those specifically. Israel will have an opportunity to address some of those tomorrow. But we again feel that these allegations that Israel is committing genocide are unfounded. That being said, we do not disagree that additional steps must and need to be taken to minimize the impact on civilians, and we'll continue to raise that directly with relevant partners.
And given that you fast-tracked a sale of 14,000 tank shells to Israel, bypassing Congress, given Secretary Blinken's participation in war cabinet
We didn't
meetings,
bypass. I'm just going to stop you right there because the premise of your question is a little misguided. We did not bypass Congress. As part of those, as part of that, there is appropriate congressional notification that happens, and we complied with those appropriately.
Okay, more and more members of Congress are demanding oversight because they're not getting adequate oversight. But no one disputes that the U.S. is isolated in protecting Israel as it conducts this operation, as it calls it, in Gaza. No one disputes the direct U.S. role. So the question is, the Secretary Blinken, who went to Israel first, declaring he was there as a Jew, identifying with the ethno-religious character of this state, which is now standing accused of the potential to commit genocide, is Secretary Blinken concerned that ruling in favor of South Africa in this case could set the stage for his own prosecution or that of your colleagues?
I'm just not going to get ahead of hypotheticals, and you probably
damn
shouldn't
right
either.
you're not.
Jackson, go ahead.
Get the fuck out. We got to bail. What did that man just say? You and your colleagues? Fuck. Us, we're on the line. Shit. Run. I didn't know I was. Fuck. Like this internal screaming. Great job, Max. Good for you, bud. Like, killing this man. You're never letting they're never letting you in that room again, by the way.
I'm surprised they did.
Yeah.
How does Max manage to get in these places?
So
if we
here's
ever
some
interview him, I have to ask him that.
Here's some responses, right? The Israeli Minister of France, Bezalel Smotrich, the court in The Hague, like many other international courts, is infused with anti-Semitic. They're saying the court is anti-Semites, Collin. The antiseptic court is out in full force. So, okay. So, speaking of what Max just brought up, right? Okay. South Africa has informed the Biden admin that it will sue the United States of America for its support of the genocide in Gaza. What are your thoughts on this? Johnny Gaz replies, please do, then go after the EU. Right? So South African lawyers have written to Biden warning that they intend to begin proceedings against his government for being complicit in ongoing international crimes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Right? Here it is. Okay. We, together with a group of lawyers from South Africa, act on behalf of all the Palestinian people who are directly affected by the ongoing international crimes and displacement perpetrated by the Israeli government since, but not limited to, 1948, for reasons fully expressed here below. Right? We hereby place the government of the United States of America on notice that we intend to bring legal proceedings against the U.S. government based on overwhelming evidence that the U.S. government has and is aiding, abetting, and supporting, encouraging, or providing material assistance and means to Israel and the IDF. This conduct by the U.S. government has enabled and continues to enable Israel to engage in international crimes against the Palestinian people.
You know what? I'm just thinking, if this was Trump, like,
mm-hmm.
Can you imagine the press?
Yep.
Being like he'll be hanged.
Look at the background here, right?
But like
the Balfour Declaration, which resulted in a significant upheaval in the lives of Palestinians. They're bringing it as far as we're implicit, right?
Yeah.
So, These goddamn South Africans are always meddling in Israel's self-defense. Israel labels South Africa legal arm of Hamas. Right? So you can tell where we're headed in our next segment, aren't you? Fee. List of countries that have supported the case of South Africa against Israel in the ICJ. Right? Look at all these. Count them up, people at home. You can pause. You can read. Right? You know, look at Morocco
who
there.
else is there?
Notice who isn't there.
Saudis. The Saudis.
Yep. US and UK, of course, are not in support. Yeah. So, bro. Okay. Johnny Graz, the Ku Klux Khazars are out in full force tonight. Hoo boy. What is that translated right there? You see this tweet, Colin? What's that translated to? Yep. Yep. Bro, we are being sued by a nation of monkeys for crimes against us. But wait, there's more. Okay, so let's look at this tweet, translated from Hebrew. It is important to note that Africans are a people of slaves, and a slave is invalid for testimony. Monkeys, liars,
Fuck that hoe! Fuck that hoe! Who said that?
This person.
Who said that?
At Spire.
Too bad it's in Hebrew.
I know, right? Monkeys, liars, supporters of terrorism, please name them. But wait, Colin. But wait, that's worse. So, I speak Hebrew. Rabbi David Mirvazer. I speak Hebrew. This translation is wrong. The original is even worse. Monkeys, liars, and supporters of terrorism, wipe out their names. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. It's fucked up, isn't it? Fucked up. Fucked up. Anyway, let's palate cleanse with Nelson Mandela, right? Ooh, I know, Colin. I know.
How surprised have you been about the furor that your remarks about the Palestinians and that whole Cuba and the flap that has followed in the wake of those remarks? Has that been a surprise to you at all?
I was more astonished than surprised. You must remember that when in 1960, leaders like Oliver Tambo and the young man sitting at the back there, Thabo Mbeki, went out of the country, one of the first steps that they took was to visit the West and to ask for assistance. In the course of that visit, they came to the United States of America and asked for help. They did not get that help. They went to Cuba, and the Cuba on the spot pledged support and actually gave it long before the West could do anything to assist us. I am surprised that anybody should now expect us to condemn Cuba, to condemn the PLO, which has been working with us right from the beginning and helping us in our problems. It is totally unrealistic. It is a typical attitude of countries which really do not approach the problem of South Africa from the point of view of the liberation struggle in South Africa, which approach these problems from the point of view of their own interest. What that view wants is that the African National Congress and the liberation movement in South Africa should be used for the purpose of conducting vendettas, enemies of the West. We must join that vendetta in order to advance the interests of the West. That we will not do.
What happened to him?
Go off my day,
funny. So before we get to our next segment, right, I wanted to bring this little video right? Which is going to air out a bit of a thing that you saw. So I'll let the video do the talking on this.
Here are 3 ways that South Africa nailed their case against Israel at the ICJ. South Africa anticipated Israel's arguments in advance and worked to undermine them. First, Israel plans on showing images and videos from October 7th to try and justify their genocidal activities. South Africa pre-countered this argument by stating that these images are irrelevant. Nothing can ever justify genocide. No exceptions can be made that would allow Israel to violate the Genocide Convention. Second, Israel plans on walking back the genocidal statements made by their government officials. South Africa undermined this by arguing that the comments cannot be reinterpreted after the fact, and provided numerous examples of explicit genocidal statements made by Israeli leaders that trickled down to soldiers on the battlefield, who then acted in accordance with these statements. South Africa says Israel's argument that we did not mean it or it was taken out of context is without merit, because the statements were repeated and reiterated several times in every sphere of the Israeli state. Third, South Africa established the stated intent to commit genocide and then provided numerous forms of evidence proving that Israel not only committed gross war crimes but also cut off the population from food, water, medicine, and fuel. There are many parts to the South African case against Israel, and all of them are brilliant. What were your favorite parts about South Africa's argument? Comment them below.
Yeah, do that. So this is a bit of a side. Do you know any of these people, Care Bear? This is none other than Charles Dance, right? AKA Tywin Lannister. So I spoke earlier, right, about how this wasn't covered by mainstream media, right? Well, you done fucked up, right. AA Ron, okay? Because here are these actors now reading it for us because you didn't showcase their actual words. So let's hear that.
Place the acts of genocide in the broader context of Israel's conduct towards Palestinians during its 75-year-long apartheid, its 56-year-long belligerent occupation of Palestinian territory, and its 16-year-long blockade of Gaza, including the serious and ongoing violations of international law associated therewith, including grave breaches of the Fourth Geneva Convention.
South Africa is highly cognizant of the facts
Sir Davos, the Onion Knight,
are distinct from other violations of international law sanctioned or perpetrated by the Israeli government and military in Gaza, including intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population, civilian objects, and buildings dedicated to religion, education, art, science, historic monuments, hospitals, and places where the sick and wounded are collected.
United Nations chiefs
Edmund
and the
Tully.
International Committee of the Red Cross, no strangers to conflict situations, have called what is unfolding in Gaza a crisis of humanity.
Okay. So, yeah. They literally went word for word, Collin, the entire thing. They've been putting it out over the days. If you go to the Palestinian literature, I think that's the website, like festival, that's it. Palestinian Literature Festival has been putting these up. So, you know, let's look at the other members here. We got all these peeps. This guy, I forget his name right off bat, but I will remember it here in a second. Fucking Peter Mullen, right? It's fucking Peter Mullen. Susan Sarandon, of course. The inconceivable guy. Inconceivable! That guy, he's here. You know? Where's that at? I have that somewhere. I do believe. Where's it at?
Inconceivable!
That guy. From the Princess Brides. Yeah. So next, right? So these people, right? Sex in the City, right? This lady up here, Cynthia Nixon.
Cynthia Nixon.
Right.
Yeah.
So Charles Dance, Liam Cunningham, Khalil Abdullah. I mean, this is their entire group. Carice Van Houten, right? Lena Headley was in this, right? Cersei Lannister. So definitely some big names. So Peter Mullen, Tobias Menzies, that's Edmund Tully. Where was that comedian? Wallace Shawn. But yeah, I mean, tons of people. So definitely good people to support, right? So, but yeah, last on the list for these, our friend Fee, right? Talking about the 100 days of Gaza, which is important.
It's been 100 days of war in Gaza, yet with Palestinian deaths mounting, there's no apparent end in sight.
Come on.
Israel continues steadfast in meeting its goal of destroying Hamas by any means necessary.
No one will stop us. Not The Hague, not the axis of evil, nor anyone else. It is viable and necessary that we continue until victory, and that is what we will do.
While Israel excuses its deadly operation by saying it's targeting Hamas, the aftermath of the bombings all across Gaza can leave even the most stoic of onlookers in tears. To put it into perspective, 24,000 Palestinians have been killed and more than 60,000 are wounded. 1.4 million people are in shelters facing a looming famine. Civilian infrastructure, schools, hospitals, and waterways have all been destroyed. The UN says that Gaza is now basically uninhabitable.
The massive death, destruction, displacement, hunger, loss, and grief of the last 100 days are staining our shared humanity.
South Africa has accused Israel of committing genocide at the International Court of Justice, providing facts that contradict Israel's narrative.
Israel's special genocidal intent is rooted in the belief that, in fact, the enemy is not just the military wing of Hamas, or indeed Hamas generally, but is embedded in the fabric of Palestinian life in Gaza.
This intent is evident from Israel's conduct in specially targeting Palestinians living in Gaza, using weaponry that causes large-scale homicidal destruction, designating safe zones for Palestinians to seek refuge, and then bombing these.
Israel contested all of the accusations and sent their own legal team to the ICJ, denying the bombing of hospitals in Gaza and assuring they were following international law.
In urban warfare, civilian casualties may be the unintended but lawful result of attacks on lawfully military objectives. International humanitarian law recognizes this reality and provides a framework for balancing military necessity.
So we'll get to that.
Out Israel's narrative. And despite Washington ramping up its weapons supplies to Tel Aviv, even they are starting to falter in their support.
Israel's security can rest on the United States, but right now it has more than the United States. It has the European Union. It has Europe. It has most of the world supporting them. But they are starting to lose that support by indiscriminate bombing that takes place.
Palestinian civilians must be able to return home as soon as conditions allow. They cannot, they must not be pressed to leave Gaza. We reject the statements by some Israeli ministers and lawmakers calling for a resettlement of Palestinians outside of Gaza. These statements are irresponsible, they're inflammatory.
Washington has even warned that Israel may actually lose the war if they continue down this path.
The lesson is not that you can win in urban warfare by protecting civilians. The lesson is that you can only win in urban warfare by protecting civilians.
But it seems like Israel is not open to its partners' criticism as it showers Gaza with more airstrikes. Things are so bad that some Israeli civilians are calling for Netanyahu's removal, angry that he's treating Israeli hostages as collateral damage. So with what's happening in Gaza being called, quote, the deadliest conflict in the 21st century, and with the death toll continuing to rise, it all begs the question, what can actually be done to stop it all?
Well,
divestment.
Yes, one of.
Which.
So, but last thing.
You know.
So this is how the ICJ is expected to vote. I've not heard when that's actually happening. Right? I asked Fee. She pretty much said like no idea, and not yet. So. So pro-genocide, US, Germany, Australia, India, Uganda, Japan, right? Pro-humanity, Brazil, Morocco, Lebanon, Somalia, Jamaica, Slovakia, and the swing votes, Russia, China, and France. Okay?
Oh, God.
So, yep. A little bit to end on, right? South Africa comes to the aid of Palestine by invoking the Genocide Convention. Just some accurate cartoons. Right? So this is titled Evidence, right? I felt like it was very fitting. So,
yeah.
Yep. So let us know what you think. Leave a comment. Plenty of stuff to talk about in that segment. So, and please share.
We're not done.
Yeah, we're not done. We have the next day to do. So I knew these would be long. I'm sorry, but to deal with it. But yeah, help us get to 2K. Subscribe. We appreciate you doing that.